Good morning. Good morning. Just to get everybody to wake up, because obviously I'm not Rabbi Smith, not as exciting. So a little story: the person is married, and his wife every day comes to him and she says, "Look, our neighbor's laundry. She doesn't know how to do laundry, and our neighbor's her laundry is always dirty." And the husband would just shrug his shoulders. One day, she comes to him and says, but she does this every day. One day she comes to him and says, "You know what? Today the laundry of the neighbor, it's clean." And the husband laughs and he says, "Yeah, I cleaned the windows." Okay, so we start the Mishnah, and we're talking about Pigul. Pigul obviously is a big theme right now in the Gemara, and we're going to have the famous Machloket of Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi is pretty revolutionary. He's taking a position different from the Chachamim, and we'll see right now in the example of the Mishnah how he does it. So we're talking about the offerings that are brought, the minchas and the kvasim that are brought on Shavuos. So the Mishnah starts like this: Shachar shnei kvasim le'echol achad min achalis. He slaughtered two of the sheep, and he thinks while he does that to eat one of the chalas tomorrow. So that's pigul. Hiktir shteis bazichim. He brings the two spoons of the levina. La'echol min asdarim lemachar, to eat one of the pieces of bread the next day, because the bread, the lechem apanim, is brought with levina. Rabbi Yossi Aimer. Rabbi Yossi has the opinion, a revolutionary opinion. Oisa chala v'oisa seder shechishav ala pigu v'chavim ala kares. The challah that he was thinking about, or the bazichim that he was thinking about, those are the ones that you have pigul and you're chayiv on it kares. V'asheni, because this comes in pairs, so it's either one lechem apanim or one bazichim. V'asheni posul ve'em bekares. The sheni is, it's not acceptable to be brought as a korban to the mizbeach, but you don't get kares. Chachamim say zeh v'zeh pigul, both of them are pigul, v'chayv melech kares. So we see here a very monumental argument. If one, in the terminology is matirim, and we're going to be discussing the Gemara what if it's matirim or not matirim. Matirim means that the korban itself has a permissible state to eat it, and if it's a double of the permissible state, then does one of those two permissible states, do they knock out the other one? Amar Avuna, 13b4. Amar Avuna. Oimer haya Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi would say, we're in the right place? A little bit before.
We went back to the Mishnah. I think that's where Rabbi Smith started yesterday.
No, 13b4. That's what you said on the.
I think that's where Rabbi Smith started yesterday.
Oh, 14b1. Sorry, I'm looking at the 14b1.
I thought
Okay.
I thought you started a little bit before, like to get us up to speed.
No. Sorry. 14. So I had a 13b. Okay, 14b1. So we're gonna go here. I didn't even there. How nice. 14b1. Rabbi Yechon. Okay.
It sounded similar.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I got it totally wrong. Why Rabbi Yechanan? Sorry, we're at 14b1. Thank you, Hillel, for correcting me. Pigya belach metoida. If a person had again, we're talking about the Shavuos, and he had a thought in the showbread of Shavuos, So what's the law? The mincha. What happens if somebody has a thought of pigul and minchas mafe? Minchas mafe is when the mincha was brought and it was baked. So if lachmei toida and minchas mafe are done, so does one do a pigul to the other? So we're back to the same question. Does one matter get pigul by the other matter? It's Tanile Rav Tachlifa Mimarava. Rav Tachlifa Marava says, "V'chen ata imer b'lachmei toida, v'chen ata imer minchas mafe." He brings a brisa, Rav Tachlifa, that says that they're both pigul. The Gemara says like this. Another case of pigul of Tarabana. Bishchat shchita chisha lecho chatzi zayis. If a person in the time of the shchita he thinks only about a chatzi zayis of pigul, and ushaz rika cheshu lecho chatzi zayis, and also in the time that the blood is being sprinkled, he thought about half of a kazais. So is it going to be pigul? So according to this brisa, it's saying that at two half a kazais, and at different times. One was just in the shchita, and one was a zrika. Why? Because shchita and zrika are considered one act, and we see here that this materin they combine together. Ikadame shchita and zrika tarayu materin. So because shchita and zrika are both materin, they permit to eat after. So that's why it's pigul. Kabbalah vaylacha, but however, receiving and taking and walking, he translates here conveying. So that would not be that would not combine because they're two separate ones. V'kedamre hanach demerachkan v'kol sheken hani demekarban. So he says like this. According to some, even the Kabbalah and Halacha, that there's a separation of when. Well, the ones that are separating by Halacha and Kabbalah and Halacha, they're not at the same minute because it's done at different times. Kol sheken hani the mekarvan, even more so the when you receive the blood and you bring the blood, that those are one after the other, that pigul would be considered a pigul, even though they're two separate. Eini, the Gemara says, really? Vatane Levi, we learned in the brisa. Vatane Levi, we learned in the brisa. Arba avodas in mitzvahs of pigul. There are four types of avodah, the work. And which one are those that don't combine? Shchita or zrika, slaughtering, receiving, slaughtering and sprinkling, Kabbalah v'alacha, receiving and conveying. So we have a question. Amarav lekasha ha-Rebbe ha-Rabbanan. So it's two different opinions. Some say they combine, and some say Rebbe says they do combine, and Rabbanan say they don't combine. Tanya, so where do we see this about Rebbe? If someone slaughters the animal to eat a half a kazais from this challah, and another person, no, I'm sorry, the other, there's two lambs. So he's thinking one half a kazais on one lamb and one half a kazais on the other lamb. Rabbi Omer Ani, he says such a beautiful language. He says Omer Ani, like Rabbi Smith explained the other day. Omer Ani shazek kasher. He says these two don't combine together. So we see here that two half of a kazais don't combine together. Amalei Abaye, Emer the Shamas the Rebbe. Is that really what Rebbe is trying to tell us, that the two halves do not combine? What does it say here? Chatzi matir v'chatzi achila. Here, there's two. It's not a comparable explanation. Why? Because half of there was one that was more like a matir, which is like a permitter, and half is a required measurement for eating. Did you hear a different Bryce or a different Mishnah that would tell you that if it's all a permitter and only half of the measurements, did you hear that Rebbe said that it would be kosher? Maybe Rebbe agrees in such a case that it would be intended to combine pigul. So now Rav Chanan again, they're arguing about what Rebbe is really intending. If we say that Rebbe really means that if the whole when we're talking about the matir, so the matir is the act that permits the food to be eaten, or the korban to be eaten, or the shirayim to be eaten. So if it involves a complete permitter, so that was done, and only half of the eating of it to combine pigul, ligzor chatzi matir chatzi achila. Why did you say that it has to be full matir and half achila? It should be half matir and half achila. Atu kuloi matir chatzi achila. We would already need to protect that if half a matir and half achila would be pigul, for sure we would know that all of the matir and half of the achila would be pigul, and this would be a gzera to protect, to make boundaries that nobody should come to a pigul in such a situation. And why would we even think about this to make a gzera? Why? Because we see that Rabbi Yossi Gazar, that Rabbi Yossi did do this as far as a decree, and because it was something that was protecting something that's there, Isa. And Rabbanan Gazre and also the Chachamim said that such a situation would be you could not bring as a korban. So we see that also Rabbi Yossi and also Rabbanan made a gzera in order to be lahasir sadam in avera, to eliminate the person. The Gemara says Rabbi Yossi goes. How do we see that Rabbi Yossi actually made this decree to protect people from getting to the actual problem? Etnan laftir levanas lamachar. If one is thinking when he does the levine, when he's bringing the korban and when one is doing the kmitza for the mincha, at the time he has this thought that the levina he'll bring it the next day. Rabbi Yossi Omer pasul bein bakaris. So Rabbi Yossi says that it's unfit to bring to the mizbeach. If somebody eats it, then a shiraim, then it's no kares. So Chachamim pigul v'chayim no kares. Chachamim say it's a full Monty. Everything is pigul, and you are chayav kares on it. So we see over here that Rabbi Yossi is not permitting to eat, even though when he says that aim by kares, he's not making it a pigul, but he's only doing it as a decree. Because if it was midoraisa, he would say it would be a chayav by kares. Rabbanan nami gazri. We see in another place that Rabbanan also made a decree to make a person avoid getting to the point where it's pigul deraisa, where it's not pigul b'kaimetz v'lo b'levaina. If one person he during he intended that the kaimetz is he's only going to be burning the kaimetz and he's not going to burn the levaina, or he was thinking that he's going to burn the levaina, but he's not going to be burning the kaimet, so he's having these um, during the burning, he's having different thoughts of pigul in different parts of the mincha. So either he was thinking about pigul of the kaimetz, but the levaina he was doing it intentionally, properly, or it was the levaina that he was thinking pigul and the kaimetz he was thinking correctly. So Rameir Aimer pigul v'chaymer lakaris. So according to Rameir, it's full on pigul. So we have here two permitters. What's the two permitters? Bringing up the offering of the Levina and the Kaimetz. So Meir says that, yeah, that's a full pigul, even though it's only half. So Chacham say it becomes unfit. So both of them, the Levina and the Kaimetz, have to be pigul. So we see over here that when they say Ein Bekaris, and it's possible that they made a decree, even though midoraisa, it shouldn't be unfit, because if it's either pigul or it's not pigul. But the Chachamim made a decree to make a person to protect him that he shouldn't come to the full pigul. So we see both Rabbi Yossi and Chachamim do this. Amalei Rava Baruch Hanan. Rav Bar Chanan said to him, Hachi Hashta, is this a true comparison that you're comparing the case of Rabbi Yossi to the case of what we just said over here, Gozar Rabbi Yossi? It is fitting to give a decree in the case of the Mishnah that we brought that shows that Rabbi Yossi made a decree. Gozar Rabbi Yossi koimetz levaina or to koimetz mincha. Why did he do this? Because koimetz of the Levina and koimetz of the Mincha, so the koimetz of the Levina is also going to be, Rabbi Yossi made a decree on it because he wanted to protect the koimetz of Mincha. So koimetz of Mincha is let me see here. So it's not that during the burning, actual of the burning of the Levina, that we're saying, okay, the next day he's thinking of that during the Avodah. So that's where we obviously Rabbi Yossi is going to make a gzera. Why? Because he wants to avoid that we do the burning of the koimetz of the mincha the next day, which is midorais. Rabbanan gazer koimetz atu koimetz mitchas choite, and Rabbanan also made this gzera because of koimetz of minchas choite. So all these things, because they're midoraisa, the chachamim went ahead and made a decree to make a boundary around it and protect it. Levaina atu levaina abav zichin, and also they also decreed a mincha that while the actual avodah of the levaina, because we need to protect it, that when the actual levaina in the lechem apanim is being burnt. So in that case, the Chachami said we want to go ahead and protect that as well, because that's also an actual avodah. So kvasim nami. So he's asking him also in the case of when they bring the two lambs of Shavuos. I'm sorry. In the case that they bring the two lambs of Shavuos, and they bring the two baziche levina, the two spoonfuls of levina. So the Chacham should also decree that the kvasim shouldn't be permitted. Why? Because we want to go ahead and protect the avodah of the first lamb against the second lamb. So we have here a situation where it's more logical for Rabbi Yossi and the Chachamim to make zeras because they're protecting, and there's a reason why they want to protect it. And in the case of Bazichim, again, he's saying that there's it's necessary to protect one against the other for the next day, in case. So therefore, they made this boundary and said that okay, the pigul, it's not a full pigul, but still it's going to be unfit. But how is that comparable to here? Here we're not talking about a full pair. Here, is there such a thing as mi'ika chatzi matir chatzi achila ba'alma? In all those cases, it's talking about a pigul in a full measurement, in a full spoon, a full kmitza. But here we're not even talking about a full kmitza and a full spoon. We're talking about half a kmitza or half a spoon, half a matir. So why would the chachami come and make a gzera in such a situation? For sure not, because this is the question that uh, this is a question of who? I think it's Abai. Abai. Yeah. I think it's Abai. Yeah, Rav Rachanan and Abai. So we see here. So Amalei Rav Rachanan Abai. So Abai answers him back. Your explanation doesn't seem it's not correct. And Abaye continues to explain the idea of what are the decrees. Achinami mistavra. It also makes sense over here. Why? The time of the Rabbana Mishum Hachi, who that's the reason that Rabbana would say that you would make a decree. Why? The Ktani Seifa. Moedim Chacham L'Rameir, if you continue in the Mishnah, Chachamim, they do agree with their mayor. But Minchas Choyte, Minchas Knois, Sheim Pigo B'Koimetz, if somebody did have an intention of pigul while the burning of the kaimetz, shepigul v'chayvim alakares. So in this case, they do agree. Chachamim do agree to our mayor. Why? Shakaimetz amater. It's a complete permitter for that particular kaimet as a kaimetz. It's not a half. It's not two. It's the full one. So he says to him, Abai says to him, Halama misna klal. Why did he even have to say that?
Different deductive stuff.
Halama misna klal. Why do we even need to say this teaching at all? Pshita. Mika mater achina. All the whole questions are when there's two material. And in some places we said, okay, there's a half a kazai, so we split the mater in half. But here it's a full, the kmitza is the full 100% matir. Why would we even have a question? But it comes to teach us, to inform us what? The time, the koimitz, the reason that the chachami say that a koimitz is pigul during the burning koimitz, really, it's only a gzeira, and it's only in order for us to make sure that we don't get to the pigul of minchas choite, that the koimitz of the minchas choite, it's also similar, and it would be considered a pigul. And therefore, the Chachamim went ahead and decided to make a gzeira. So we see here that also Rabbi Yossi and also Chachamim, they would make a gzeira in the case of pigul, but only if it's a full pigul on itself, not half a kazais or anything like that. And it seemed the Gemara finishes here, seemingly that Abaye is correct, and he upshlogged Rabba Bar Chana. Okay, let's see here. Neat maze, Achas Minachalois. If one of the two chalois that are brought on Shavuos became unpure, or Chal Min Asdorim, or one of the Lechem Apanim. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Shnei Mitzvah Beis HaSreifa. The challah or that became tameh or the lechem apanim, they both get they go out to be burnt, and I'm assuming that this is obviously in Chutz Lazar. Why? She'en korban tzibur chaluk. You can't take a sacrifice of the korban of a tzibur of a congregation and split it. Since it's two loaves and one loaf is gone, and the other loaf has to go. The same thing with lechem apanim. Chachamim have argue on Rabbi Yehuda and say only the one that's Tomei goes to Beis HaSreifa gets burnt, and that one goes out, and the pure one should be eaten. Very, very strong machlokes. Amar Lezer machlokes. Sorry, Amar Rabbi Elazar. Amar Rabbi Elazar machlokes lifnei zrika. The only time the Chachamim in Rabbi Yehuda, yeah, the only time Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda are having this machlokes if they were a korban tzibur that was more than one item, and it became one part became tameh. So it's only lifnei zrika before they sprinkling of the blood. So that's the only time that they have the argument. But after the zrika was done, it's mamish. It's already became part of a korban, and you can't just go ahead and take a kosher part of the korban and throw it out, and not throw it out, but burn it. So now the Gemara says, okay, fine, v'lifnei zrika, and according to that, before zrika, b'mai pligi. What are they arguing about when it's before zrika? What's the issue that Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with the Chachamim? Amar Rav Papa betzitz meratza lachilus kamiflegei. Beautiful. Rav Papa says they're arguing. So we know that the tzitz is mechaper, means it accepts the parts that were eaten that weren't supposed to be eaten, and the tzitz is meratza. He brings the tzitz that the Kohen Gadol would wear. So that's where they're it's mechaper. That's where they're arguing. What are they arguing? So Rabbanan say that in that case where only one part of the showbread or one part of the lechem apanim and one part of the challah. So if there's 2 or 12 or whatever, and it's korban tzibur, it's separated. So Rabbanan say, yeah, you could eat it. Why? Because if that's an issue, the tzitz is the one who combines with that eating and makes it acceptable. Rabbi Yehuda says that no, it doesn't. It doesn't. The tzitz doesn't go ahead and transcends and uplifts such a thing, and therefore, because he had the opinion that ein korban tzibur, that the sacrifice of a tzibur does not get split. You can't split a tzibur, and therefore he says you have to go and send it out to burning. This is a tremendous machlokes because it goes down to the idea of the strength of a tzibur. A tzibur congregation, and does the tzitz even do it before the korban. There's a tzitz mechaper even before the sprinkling of the blood. So we have a tzibur, and they didn't receive forgiveness because the actual act of the korban is the sprinkling of the blood. That's like the first act and the first moment of forgiveness. And Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda are having a very, very monumental argument on this position of the tzibur, if they have the strength to be uplifted, even though the sprinkling of the blood wasn't done. Amler Rav Nasnar Papa. But what happens that according to that if you bring something that's brought up to the korban, like a limb or something, that's tzitz maratza la'oilin, and it already went into the mizbeach. That the tzitz, even though they shouldn't have gone to the mizbeach, but they went on the mizbeach, that tzitz maratza la'oilin. Once they go up on the mizbeach, the tzitz says the holiness of the mizbeach combined with the tzitz, even though they shouldn't have gone up in the mizbeach. So the tzitz of Aaron HaKohen, the Kohen Gadol, is going to make it acceptable.
Powerful garment.
Is that why we said only below your din pages back?
Right. Once they go up, you can't go down because even if they weren't proper, the tzitz has a way to uplift such a situation. And the tzitz is only the Kohen Gadol, only Aaron HaKohen was the first Kohen Gadol, and he was the one who could uplift even. He could go so low and stoop so low to uplift something that's on. If it wasn't in the mizbech, it would be usher. It would not be allowed to be brought into the mizbech. So how could Aaron go ahead and uplift such a tuma or such a pigul or such a? It's already in the mizbech and it's not proper. And Aaron HaKohen, through obviously all his eight godim represent different aspects of Aaron, but how could it be that in Aaron HaKohen uplifts it? We said before that we told the story about the wife who was looking through the window, and so the thing about Aaron is he had a clean window when he would look at anybody. He actually Aaron HaKohen was so Aaron HaKohen was unique because he saw things not in black and white. The first thing he would do, we're veering here for 1 minute. The first thing Aaron would do is he would come to two business partners who had a fight, or two friends, or a husband and wife, and he would do something shocking. He would lie.
Whoa.
Aaron HaKohen would lie. He would tell the other partners, he wants to make peace with you, when in fact, no such thing ever happened. That's why when you go so deep for the sake of peace, for the sake of tshuva, then at that moment, you could be in a place as Aaron HaKohen, Oyev Shalom, Roidev Shalom, you could uplift even a tuma that came onto the Mizbeach, you could uplift it. Okay. This is Maratza Uflige. What are they arguing? Netanya Nitmechad Mina Bezichin, if one of the spoons of Levina that would come with Lechem upon him became Tameh, Rabbi Yehuda Eimer Shneim Yasu B'Tuma. Rabbi Yehuda says they continue. You could bring them both. Lefi Shen Konsiber Choluk. You can't separate them. So we see over here something that's almost the opposite. Rabbi Yehuda says over here that before we said Rabbi Yehuda says Eina tzitz maratza lechilas, and here we see that Rabbi Yehuda says you continue to bring it in betuma. So how could you say that that's the argument? That's not the argument of Rabbi Yehuda Chachamim. It's completely Rav Huna Ber of Nasan completely upshlogged the reasoning of Rav Papa, of the reasoning why Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim would say this. Boy, the Marabashi Tashma, come and learn in a braysa. Rav Yudah Eimer afilu shevet echad tameh v'chol shvatim tar. So we're first we were talking about the separation of the korban. So let's say there's two chalas or there's two lechem apanim and there's many lechem apanim. So that was a korban of the congregation. Here we're not talking about the korban. We're talking about the one who's bringing the korban, because the congregation has to be whole. So what's the situation here? It goes completely to a different location. Before we're talking about the korban, now we're talking about the one who's bringing the korban. Afilu shevet echad tameh v'chol hashvatim taharim. So there's a question: Could you bring a korban for the tzibur, for the entire tzibur, if there's one tribe is completely tameh and the others are tar? So what are they supposed to do? Do they come to the Beis Hamikdash and do the korban? So Rabbi says yes or betuma. Yes. If you shen korban tzibur choluk. So the law of Rabbi Yehuda that korban tzibur is not split is not only in the korban itself, it's also in the people who are bringing the korban, showing the unity of Bnei Yisrael, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that when all the shvatim are tahar, they can uplift even a shevet that's tameh, which is it's mind-boggling. But why would he have to say that? V'hacha mai hatzitz maratzeika. But there's a possibility of the tzitz accepting it. So why did he have to say that it was in korban tzibur choluk? So we see that it's not the issue of the tzitz bringing the forgiveness or not. It has to do with the korban tzibur that even in the case of a shevet, that they would have to do it. It had nothing to do with the tzitz. Another question. V'omar Ravina Toshma, come and learn. Nitmeis achas menacholos. Achas minasdarim. If one of the cholos or one of the lechem apanim becomes tamei, Rabbi Yehuda Eimer shnei mitzvah beis esrifa. They should both go out to be burnt. Lefi shein korban tzibur choluk. Lechacham Eimer matamei betumasoi v'atar v'yichal. So Rabbi Yehuda again says, like we learned in the Mishnah, that if one loaf becomes tameh, so they both get burnt because you can't split a korban tzibur. And Chachamim say that it should be eaten. Why? Now, if it says that, if what you're saying about then why should you have to say that? Why would Rabbi Yehuda say they should go get burnt? They should go brought onto the korban. It should be. He could have said it specifically instead of saying the reason why these two challahs cannot be split, not because she'en korban tzibur chaluk, but because the tzitz is not meratzeh. He should have said it straight up. Why is he saying a different reason? If you're saying, Rav Papa, you're trying to say that the reason is because the tzitz is meratzeh on eating or not eating, you should have said it. He specifically, or Yudah specifically said none of that sort. He said it's about korban tzibur not splitting. Elam Rabbi Yechanan, Lamad Aruch Hu B'Fiv Rabbi Yehuda. Beautiful language how Rabbi Yechanan uses. He says it's already established and it's clear, like a Aruch HaShulchan, like a set table. That knowledge is already established, and we got it in a tradition. She'ein korban tzibur choluk. So it seems like he's implying that the halacha, according to Rabbi Yehuda, he always had this tradition that no matter what, a korban tzibur cannot be split. And in the case that they get tameh before the blood is sprinkled, they go out to burn because you cannot split a congregation. Okay. Atayda mefagelis es alechem. So you would bring a korban toida, and you would bring bread with it. So if you had a thought of pigul in the toida, in the korban, so the bread is also the bread is going to be also pigul. However, if you had a thought of pigul on the bread, it does not make the toida, the korban pigul. Why? Ketzad. Shachat es toida lechem men lamachar. If one, when he did the shchita of the korban toida, he was thinking about eating it the next day, he ve'alechem fugolim. Both of them, the bread and the korban, they're pigul. However, if he thought lechol min alechem lamachar, just he did the shchita well, but the eating when he was bringing the bread, he was thinking to eat it tomorrow. Alechem efugo, v'atoida nefugo. So these are two separate things. The bread, it's very interesting. So when it comes to the korban, the foundation of bringing the bread was the korban. So if you had a pigul in the korban, that swipes and it sweeps with it the bread. However, if you only have a pigul on the bread and you didn't have a pigul on the korban, the Mishnah says it's separated. They don't. The bread is not a matir and it's separated. Akvasim efaglim esalechem. However, when you're bringing the this is in the case of the korban of Shavuos, where you bring the two lambs. So if you had pigul in the shchita, so the bread would be pigul. The two loaves of bread, if you had pigul on that to eat it the next day, that does not make the kvasim pigul, doesn't render them pigul. Ketzah. How's that possible? Hashechet as a kvasim, if somebody slaughters the two lambs, lechol mehem lemachar, to eat them tomorrow, lechol is alechem, wait, hem ve'alechem ifugolim, sorry. So if somebody, while he was slaughtering the sheep, he was thinking to eat them tomorrow, so the sheep and the bread are pigul and you can't eat. However, lechos alechem lemachar, if you're just the shchita was good, but just you were thinking about the bread to eat it the next day, alechem efugo v'kvasim enu fugolim. It seems just on first glance the explanation ketzad and all that seems very very obvious and simple. Let's see if there's anything there. Anybody else see that? It seems very very like we already understood that.
Seems like the lambs are the matzah for the bread.
Yeah, for sure. The lambs are the foundation, and they're the matir and everything. But why did he have to give the explanation? The ketzad. How so? It seems like he's just repeating what it is, like adding a couple letters. Well, let's see. My timer. What's the reason that a pigul of taida makes the
I
bread?
don't think he can use the term matir for the lambs for the bread, because the bread has their own kmitza, and the bread and the matir.
No, this is not a. I don't believe
Sweet.
there's a kmitza in the taida. I don't know.
If you have bread,
Yeah, it's actual bread. It's not a mincha.
it's oh,
No.
it's bread.
Here we're talking about korban taida, where you bring the slaughtering of the korban. Let's say you bring the slaughter of korban and you bring bread with it. It
Oh,
doesn't
so
say
there's
about.
never a kmitza in that bread.
I don't. In this particular
They
one, doesn't
mentioned
seem.
it
It doesn't
it's
seem
the
like there's a
food.
kmitza. Maybe
I don't know.
I'm not. I'm not 100% knowledgeable on all that, but it seems like it. So what Hill is saying makes sense. My time. So what's the reason that we say that the bread has a downfall of pigul by the korban, but the bread by itself doesn't bring down the korban itself? Either Mishum Rav Kahana, maybe it's because according to Rav Kahana, the Amar Rav Kahana, Minayin lelachme taida, sheniku taida. Why do we call the bread of taida? They're also called the taida shenemar v'hikir v'alzeh v'chataida chalis, because the Torah itself calls it the sacrifice of the taida you bring the loaves. So you could say, it says vehikriv. Vehikriv, you bring it together with the toida. Al zevach toida, you bring chalas. So the Torah gives you specific. Ihachi, if you just now brought that pasuk and said that's the reason, so maybe ipchanami. Maybe also the opposite, that if the bread it has pigul, that the korban itself should be pigul. Because why? Because you look at the words. You said hikriva zevachatay the chalos. So it almost shows you that the Torah says that one is attached to the other. So the Gemara says halakasha lechem ikra toida toida lo ikra lechem. A korban toida is not called bread. A bread is called toida because it says here what he says. The Torah says the word zevach toida chalos. But the korban is never called bread. So therefore, one is pigul the other, and in the case of bread, bread doesn't pigul the korban. El haktani. Akvosim efagnis alechem, v'alechem and efagos akvosim. This we learned in the Mishnah. Where do we find lechem hechashkachan deikir kvosim? Where do we find that bread is going to be called a lamb? We don't. So therefore, the lamb makes the bread pigul, but the bread does not make the lamb's pigul. Another explanation. He says, Ella hainu taima. This is the reason lechem glal taida. The bread is brought as a result, and together with the taida and taida glal lechem. If a person brings bread, he doesn't bring a korban taida for it. What's the reason that the korban is being brought? You see that the foundation and the reason that it's being brought is because of the korban or because of the sheep, and not because when you bring bread. When you bring bread, you don't bring a sheep. We both need. Both of them are needed. Why? If we would say only in the korban toida, why would we say korban toida that it does have pigul of the korban, but the bread is not? Belechem lo mifagla toida mishum de lo hiskaku zabetnufa. When you go ahead and do the lifting and waving of the korban. So in the case of taida, you don't need the bread to be on the korban when you do the lifting. But in kvasim of Shavuos, it specifically says that when you lift and wave the two lambs, you have to have the bread attached to it throughout the whole procedure. So maybe since there's such an act as part of the korban, you would think that one is a matir to the other. That maybe the bread should make pigul the kvasim. We do need it to show us both that in both cases, the bread does not make pigul the sacrifice or the lamb because they are not the main show over here. The main show is the korban, and only the korban can make the bread pigul, but the bread cannot make the korban pigul.
Sandwich.
By Minei Rabbi Lazar, Merav, Asheichet, Esateido Lechukazais Imena, Milachma Lamachar. So someone he's sheichet the korban taida, and he's thinking to eat a kazais of it and the bread to the next day. A kazais of the korban and a kazais of the bread the next day. Mahu. We already know that the taida is going to be pigul. There's no question about it. Ashta kuloi melachma lami pagle. If one says that the kazais, the question is here like this. He says he's thinking about a kazais, but he's saying the kazais, he didn't, in his mind, he didn't split that I'm going to eat a kazais just from the korban toida or just from the bread. He put the two together. This whole thing is very very it's all the way up in the heaven. It shows you how intention could make it or break it. He's taking the entire korban, so you have the animal and you have the bread, and he says, "I'm thinking of a kazais of both of them next day." So if he was thinking one of just the korban, so it's going to be pigul. If he was thinking that he's going to eat from the bread, the korban is not going to be pigul. The question is, mimena umilachma mibayi. If in his thought he was saying a kazais from both of them, what do you do? So does it become pigul on this intent or not? So when do we have this question? So we're saying that the question is the bread going to be, if the person is thinking it's not even half, it's that he took both of them at the same time. Mimena umilachma, from the korban and from the bread. So does the korban toida, let's say, has to be at least 1 point of the korban. Let's say in the worst case scenario, let's say he took 99% of the bread and 1% of the korban. Are we going to say that 1% of the korban adds to the 99% of his thoughts of pigul on the bread? Or we say the two don't ever connect to each other? So this is a very strong question. Because we know before we said that the bread does not make the korban toida pigul. So are we going to say that 99% of the bread in the thought of the korban toida is going to be added and together to the 1% of the bread, or 50%, or whatever it is, because this is a thought. So Rav says, Amar lei, Abezu alecha mefugo, v'atoida ein mefugo. So in the same case here, we say we give the full amount. Are we doing time? Yeah, we should stop here. Okay. All right, we could stop here.
Oh, this is good.
Grace and Shkoyach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
We definitely missed Rabbi Smith. That's true.
thank you. Good.